Thank you.
You could ask me for it.
Oh, no, I'm just saying.
I don't know why I should spring one.
Thank you. Good at the moment. Thank you.
Oh, you detail, right?
I'm ready. I guess I'll move that. I was going to say nobody's going to see the board members. Yes.
Right here.
She was looking for you.
She's always in the first seat.
She was looking for you. She came over.
Let's see, because think about it. You tell me brings donuts. That's something. To me, that's something.
She don't act.
She's real. Great.
My mind's good. My body's good. Mine's still sharp, but I can't do nothing. That's all.
Right here. Very long process. Yeah. Oh, it is. Well, it's new, you introduced new concepts which have to be embraced. Right after the whole series thing.
I'm sorry? Everybody. You should be okay.
Does he have to come back? What's up, John? It's safe.
I left something in the office.
I got a bad cold. Stay away from me.
What?
I left that. I got that.
I got that. I left.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Just a point of procedure so that everyone is aware. There are, this hearing today is a bifurcated hearing. It will adjourn, it'll go in recess after the people speak on the budget, and it will be recessed till 7 o'clock tonight. If you speak this afternoon, you will not be permitted to speak on the budget tonight because it's all one hearing. It will just be recessed at the completion of this afternoon's session to 7 o'clock tonight. So once again, when anybody be misled, thinking that if they come back at 7 o'clock, they'll be able to speak again. If you speak this afternoon, you do not speak tonight. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the Town of Hempstead budget hearing. I do apologize for my current physical state. I'm recovering from surgery, which was originally scheduled to not conflict with the budget hearing, but the budget hearing was shifted from October 23rd to today. I did request a different date be chosen, but that request was denied. Still, it's very important for me as a supervisor to be here today because the debate over budgets is more than just budgets, bonding, and borrowing. It's about more than numbers on a page. It's more than just cutting and spending. It's about the kind of future we want. It's about the kind of town and community we believe in and what we want for our children. Before we get started, I would like to thank very much the Controller's Office, all of the commissioners, and my staff for their work this year in putting the budget together. They worked very hard, and you should be proud of the work that you did. This year's budget certainly hasn't been short of healthy debate, and it's a debate that's been lacking, in my opinion, for many years prior. So I wanted to make sure that I could be here today to hear your concerns and to cast my vote. I would now ask Councilman Ambrosino to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I ask everyone to please remain standing to observe a moment of silence for all the victims who were lost this weekend in the Pittsburgh massacre, and also for Christina Becker, who is the sister of our Commissioner Greg Becker, and former Nassau County Legislator Fran Becker, who was tragically lost this weekend as well. I'd now like to invite Rabbi Mordecai Kamenetsky from the Yeshiva South Shore, Bruce, you can help me out on this one. Beit Binyamin, to please step forward and share a few words for us.
My very best wishes for a speedy recovery. Let us pray. We come here this afternoon in thought and in prayer in this united town of Hempstead, a bright star in the galaxy of freedom that is the United States of America. But once again, we are burdened with heavy hearts as another house of worship was defiled in a senseless act of violence as 11 of my brothers and sisters in faith and of all of our brothers and sisters in citizenship were brutally gunned down. The only reason was that of their faith. Their white and blue prayer shawls were stained with blood red, transforming those symbolic colors of our United States flag into a new symbol of tragedy and fear. Our founding fathers weep with us, as does Lady Liberty, dripping her tears into a harbor that was once filled with waves of immigrants and the joyous cheers of freedom and hope. We join in prayer for their souls and the well-being and healing, physically and emotionally, for all those who were cruelly harmed by this venomous crime. I studied and taught Torah for nearly 5 years in Pittsburgh as I served as a rabbi there. And I lectured at Pitt and Carnegie Mellon University. It is in Pittsburgh almost 30 years ago that I heard Mayor Dick Caligieri, may God rest his soul, what a wonderful man, talk about his visit to the former Soviet Union, where he saw the rebirth of Jewish life begin to flourish after 70 years of repression. And he said something to us so most poignant. He said that the reason that Jewish life will flourish in Moscow it is because of the beacon of Jewish life and light that shines forth from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and ignites their spirit way across the ocean in the former Soviet Empire. I say to you that the beacon of hope and friendship and tolerance and good spirit will once again thrive in this great United States because of the hope and the friendship and the tolerance and the good spirit that will shine forth from this room here in Town Hall, in the town of Hempstead, into our streets and across America. In this time of difficulty, and as we are about to convene a budget meeting of our wonderful and welcoming town of Hempstead, let us turn to each other in harmony and support. Let us look to the right and let us look to the left and embrace all views to properly fund the most important governmental services that assist our community and make it a model for all America to emulate. May the Almighty God, all of you, He guide all of you to help in your wisdom to protect our children from learning to hate and to have any bigotry and bias, and protect them from those terrible men and women who may purvey it. May your resolutions uphold and support those who protect us from all harm and service the needs of all our citizens. We beseech you, Almighty God, our Lord, to allow His gracious Spirit, broad vision, and sense of responsibility to infuse our town government, led by Town of Hempstead Supervisor Laura Gillen and the members of our town board, to do their work in good faith, in good cheer, and in good spirit. Again, I say, and I conclude, look to those on your left and look to those on your right, both in reality and proverbially. Open your hearts to them to bring us all together. But most importantly, look above and let His eyes, the eyes of the Almighty, shine His grace and countenance upon you. And let us all say, amen.
Thank you, Rabbi, for those beautiful words. Madam Clerk, will you please call the first item?
Councilman Ambrosino? Here. Councilman Blakeman? Here. Councilman D'Esposito? I'm here. Councilman Dunn? Here. Councilwoman King Sweeney? Here. Senior Councilwoman Gooseby? Here. And Supervisor Gillen?
Here. Madam Clerk, please call the first public hearing.
Proposed assessment roll, Greater Atlantic Beachwater Reclamation District for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2019.
I do not have any slips on this particular public hearing. Is there anyone who would like to be heard?
Supervisor, I move that this item be continued until 7 p.m. this evening.
Madam Clerk?
Councilman Ambrosino? Aye. Councilman Blakeman?
Aye.
Councilman D'Esposito? Aye. Councilman Dunn? Aye. Councilwoman King Sweeney? Senior Councilwoman Gooseby? Aye. Supervisor Gillen?
Aye. Madam Clerk, please call the second public hearing.
Preliminary budget, Town of Hempstead, for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2019.
Kwari Aliam? from Stony Brook, Wari Aliam. It's your turn to speak. Yes, you can withdraw. Ann Bowl. Ann Bowl from Lynbrook. Mary Ellen Cray. Pearl Jacobs.
Good afternoon. Supervisor Gillen, I wish you a speedy recovery. I would like to speak this afternoon on transparency and why not transparency.
Are you speaking with respect to the preliminary budget?
I'm speaking just in transparency. Yes.
This is a budget hearing, so it has to be related to the budget.
It's regard to that. So I would like to, I'm speaking on behalf of the Nostrand Garden Civic Association in Uniondale, and I would like to begin with two definitions of the word transparency that I particularly admire. Transparency characterized by visibility or accessibility of information, especially concerning business practices. And the other definition is free from pretense or deceit. These two definitions resonate with me because just by sheer definition, shouldn't transparency be the foundation of good government and a good foundation for our Town of Hempstead budget? Research has revealed that there's a direct correlation regarding higher levels of transparency with lower levels of corruption. Governments that practice transparency have lower deficits and debt. Increased access to government financial policies empower the public to fight corruption. On the other hand, a lack of transparency in government breeds corruption and a culture of corruption which needs to be fought with great urgency. When politicians hide how they spend the people's money, it's a serious political mistake. This practice weakens legitimacy in democracies and increases public mistrust. Lack of transparency, corruption, and inequality together creates an unequal distribution of power and wealth in society and promotes enrichment for a select few at the expense of the public good. Good government, which should be practiced in the Town of Hempstead, is what we need. Transparency and accountability is what we need. The pay-to-play practices and budget decisions that are made behind closed doors are no longer acceptable. The public has tired of the smoke and mirrors games that are played by some politicians, thinking that their constituents are too dense and to see through the deceit. Newsflash, people are onto the games. Many people have woken up and are ready to be a part of positive change, and that change is for openness and transparency. As politicians, you were elected to act in the public interest and to make the best decisions for your constituents. Ego and self-serving behavior have no place in politics, or for that fact, in any workplace. It is the overwhelming will of the people, and I speak on behalf of my Uniondale residents, that all political spending should be genuinely transparent with real-time information that is accessible to the public online. And again, we're asking for clear and concise transparency regarding the budget, and I applaud you, Supervisor Gillen, for fighting for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Patricia Balassi.
Hello. Since we just got the budget report, I haven't had a chance to really go over it, but I was wondering about what is the average number of people who work for council people, in your district offices? Do you have?
Mr. Controller, can you answer that question?
I can supervise if you just give me a minute to refer to my notes.
Absolutely.
And I was wondering about the budget for personal services versus other than personal services, roughly.
Can you clarify what you mean by that question? I'm sorry.
Well, personal services and then other things that are not personal.
You mean within the budgets of the council members?
Just wondering.
Is there a breakdown?
I can get to that in just a second. Your first question dealt with the number of employees per council district. There are 6 council district, two employees per district, one being the council person or councilwoman in this case, the other being a legislative aide. Second half of your question, I was referring to my notes. I need you to start over again on that one, please.
Okay, what roughly is the budget, excuse me, for personal services and other than personal services?
Ma'am, do you mean, I'm just guessing what you mean. Do you mean the controller just said there are 2 people for each councilmanic district, the council person and their assistant? And then do you mean what staff other than the assistant? Mr. Controller, do you have that number?
We have one majority district, which encompasses 5 of the councilmanic district, and one minority district, which encompasses 1 of the councilmanic districts. And if you give me 1 second, I'll get to that in just a second. I got it right here. Okay, hold on 1 second. Sorry for the delay. It's quite a large document. Just give me 1 second. Thank you.
You could give it to me later.
I'll get it to you later. Is that fair?
No hurry. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm so sorry. Could you please come back and just state your name and address for the record, Ms. Balassi? Just,
Patricia Balassi. I live in Point Lookout.
thank you. So see the controller afterwards, and he'll give you that information. Susan Ryan?
Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. And Laura, I hope you're feeling better. I really do.
Thank you. Could you just state your name and address for the record?
Suzanne Gordon Ryan, and I live at 100 Inwood Avenue in Point Lookout. I just had I looked online the other day, and just the only thing that was online in terms of the agenda that I saw where there were 2 issues that are going to be looked at later, and then it was just the salaries of kind of the people up here. And so it was really hard to, I'm not overly prepared with this. I'm going to ask some questions that I have about it, but it would be easier. And I know budgets are very difficult, but it would be better if more was online before the meeting so that we could be kind of cogent in what we're asking you. So I would ask to see if there's any way you could do that. In terms of the general fund appropriations and the budgets for the different departments, they're all kind of, you know, modest, except for the Department of General Services. That's, I understand that. But Parks is like $32 million. Why is that so far out of whack with the other numbers?
Mr. Controller?
It's a very large park budget, I think.
That has many, many parks.
Yeah, I know.
So the amount that is devoted financially to cover the cost to run those parks is what's in front of you. That's $32 million. It's most of it's a lot of manpower, and I can go over in detail all the expenses if you'd like. With the services rendered and the number of parks in the town of Hempstead.
It's very high. It looks high. I've been in parks. And then in terms of the numbers, I know in Newsday it was reported that there were 75, I think, items that were added to the budget. And in terms of that, I'm interested kind of in looking at, with the Councilmanic District, you have two people, like, I'm just going to ask Karen because she's my representative. In your office, do you have just one person working for you, or two, or how does that work?
Mr. Conroy, if you could explain that a little bit, because you have the numbers better than I do. We had, I guess it was just this year, we introduced a pooling arrangement as far as the budget is concerned, and we also share services. So
We have is, as I mentioned to the earlier speaker, each councilmanic district employs two employees, one being the council member and the other being a legislative aide.
Okay.
Councilmanic districts 2 through 6 constitute the majority district. That in itself covers, there is a line item specifically for the majority district, which employs, and I'll get that number, a certain number of employees at a certain cost. There is a minority district, which covers district number 1 with the same concept.
And are they the same?
Pooling arrangement that the councilwoman refers to.
And do they have the same budget, the minority and the majority, or no? In terms of their councilmanic, that would be Dorothy. Does she have a lower budget than like Erin or Bruce would have?
No, excuse me, let me see if I can explain it. We have assigned to each one of us a legislative aide. There is also a central staff, a pooled staff, of which 5/6 goes to the majority because there are 5 majority members, and 1/6 goes to the minority leader, who's also the senior council person, Dorothy Gooseby. So she has her aide, then she has a central staff that is 1/6. It's directly in proportion to the representation of her party on the town board. So 5/6 we go to the majority, 1/6 to the minority.
if I could add to that, Bruce, as well, the senior councilwoman's a good example because we share we share the village of Freeport and the town of Baldwin. So there'll be a lot of swapping of services and the like. So it's not exactly 5/6 and 1/6. Sometimes it's a little heavy here or there, just depending upon the town and the need. And there's a lot of just town-wide issues.
Right. Okay, in terms of like the supervisor's office, what's kind of the head count in terms of how many people report to the supervisor? And how does that work in terms of running the whole town?
Well, that's
You know,
changed.
in
That's
cooperation
changed in
with
this
yours.
budget because a number
Yeah.
of people were moved out of my office
Right.
into the majority budget. So they've been taken from my office and they've been put into their office. For
Business
example, all
class.
the ladies in the helpline who have worked for me. Another woman who was the first person, the only person left in my office when I took office. She's a fabulous worker. We've been delighted to have her. She's been a great part of my staff, but she's been taken out of my budget and put into their budget without consultation with me or without consultation even with her.
I would,
So the number, I think, is around 7. I have 17 people who work for the supervisor.
I can clear that up. Here's what we have, 2018 and 2019. In both years, the supervisor's budget had 19 positions budgeted for, full-time positions, no vacancies in both years.
no vacancies.
No vacancies.
And then how does the new budget affect the head count in her office? Because that's really important.
It's the same.
It's going to be the same?
In 18.
So how are they moved out?
In 18, 19 full-time budgeted positions, the budget we're currently in. The budget we're contemplating today, the same number with no vacancies.
Okay, so how would she, in the newspaper, they were saying that there was 5, she was going to lose 5
Averill, can you step in on that one,
positions.
please?
How does that work? Because it's just really important in terms of, you know, good government that the supervisor have.
I believe there was a correction, right?
In general services, there, sorry, in general services, there are 5. Yes, can you hear me? Yes? In general services, there, the employees for the helpline are charged to the supervisor's department, but they reside, the head count resides in general services. This year, the employees for the helpline were moved into the majority, making them a little heavier than the minority district this year.
the supervisor's budget, one position was removed with the amendment. The position of Director of Communications, that position was removed as part of the 76 amendments from the board.
Well, then, how many people did Tony Santino have when he was the supervisor?
He had the 19 full-time positions,
He had
as I
the
mentioned
19?
earlier, yes. That's all encompassing.
Okay, so so there's no change in that. What my point is that I really think it's important that the supervisor have really qualified staff and enough. And, I want to urge that. It's really important that, people are watching that. It's extremely important. And I think part of it too, and this has been a horrible week for everybody, and I just think the lack of civility at public meetings is really kind of getting out of hand, and I'm not here to do anything but ask questions and be respectful to all of you. And I'll also say that the $71,000 I don't think is enough for the work that you do, or $160 for Laura, or $106 for Sylvia. It's really, you work very hard, all of you, but there is an imbalance in the town of Hempstead that a lot of people are looking at, including myself. But I can say this respectfully and not, do it, there's too much of that.
And it's important that people like you do come before us so that we can explain
Right.
These issues. One of the things you should know is I believe it's under the law, the supervisor is only entitled to 2 positions. We felt it was important in the majority that we not restrict the supervisor and give her less senior staff than her predecessor. So while the town board would be in their legal rights to give the supervisor only 2 full-time senior staff, it was felt that we didn't want to break the precedent that had been set in the past so that the supervisor would have a sufficient senior staff to carry out her duties as the supervisor.
And I think some of the concern is that people feel that a lot of this is done outside of, including the supervisor in these decisions. And I know you're all doing the best you can, but it just seems like it's out of balance. And that has to do with people voting. So, I can be at a meeting and say, there's too many Republicans on it, but if people don't get out and vote, that's not, my call is to stay involved and as a active citizen respect, the elected officials, but, it is out of balance here. And it's just numbers. So we are looking and we are, very supportive of Laura as well as the rest of you that are doing this, but that's where the imbalance comes from. But I think I've had the experience of working for both county, town, and, state government, so I do understand government. And a lot of people don't. So, for instance, Laura has come to a group that we have in Point Lookout. Erin is going to be coming next week. But honestly, I think that the more all of you do that, the better it is, because people don't understand budgets and they don't always understand that. So it's very helpful what you're doing today, and thank you for taking that, and please help Laura. Thank you. I got my 5 minutes.
Thank you. Rich Shuren?
Good afternoon, Richard Shuren, 167 Jefferson Avenue, Harbor Island, New York. George Marlin, a prominent conservative leader, wrote an article where he talks about the majority's budget, and he made some comments, and I would just like to know what your response is, particularly you, Councilman.
I'd like to speak to that.
Rainey.
George Marlin.
I'd like to finish the question, please.
Oh, I
okay?
thought you want.
No.
Well, you want to take it one at a time?
George Marlin said that the GOP board members have made the ridiculous claim that their budget is leaner while protecting the $2 million in holdover patronage employees and beefing up their staff allowances to the tune of $500,000. The key to the GOP shell game is the assumption that there will be an $8 million in savings from 100 retirements. This claim is a specious one. It does not include the cost of separation and accrued vacation pay, assumes none of the positions will be filled, and that the 100 people will actually call it quits. And when the jig is up on their phony inflated revenue and savings projections, to avoid raising taxes, they will drain rainy day funds and issue long-term bonded debt to cover the rest. So my question to you is, what do you have to say to that?
Who's George Marlin to make those observations? He's never come to one of our meetings. He's never read our budget. He's a complete fraud. He calls himself a conservative, and he calls himself an expert. I've known the guy for over 20 years, and I've never met anybody that knew less about government and less about budget than George Marlin.
And if I may, I think the best bet to handle that question is to actually be answered by an expert. So, Mr. Conroy, if you could explain the meaning of less savings, which I think Mr. Shern is trying to reference.
I'd appreciate if you would respond to the specific point.
If you could explain to Mr. Shern how less savings works and how over the years the town of Hempstead has actually used this methodology and it's worked. And it's proven. It's not just done by guessing. There's actually a mathematical formula behind it.
Thank you, Councilman. And thank you for the expert. I'm gonna write that down. I appreciate that. We introduced the concept, we being the town board, in the budget we're currently in, which is 2018's budget. In July of 2017, there was a collective bargaining agreement adjustment, which was an incentivizing employees to get off the payroll. It was a medical incentive for coverage as a retiree. I'm not going to go into the details, but it was, let's call it a big carrot. So in 2018, as a result of that, we said, we have all of these positions budgeted for the full year. There's a lot of sentiment out there that a lot of people are going to retire under this incentive. So we budgeted $12 million as less savings. In that would be avoided salary as a result of those retirements during the course of the year. And again, we budgeted for those people for the entire year. We said 100 would go. We are currently, through 3 quarters of 18, 113 have gone at $11.3 million. We are $700,000 shy of the objective, that being $12 million. We have carried that concept over into 2018, and the less savings number budgeted throughout this budget is $8.5 million. I believe it to be appropriate, and I believe it to be conservative. And as demonstrated in 2018, we are there.
Okay, so basically what you're saying is you're just taking last year's experience and you believe that you're disputing George Marlin's claim that...
I don't even know who George Marlin is. He doesn't work with this budget. I do, and my colleagues do, okay. And I am very confident that we will hit... Finish, no, I want to finish because we've been kicking this around. Again, let me finish. $8.5 million is a conservative number, and we stand behind it.
Okay.
To be clear, excuse me, Councilman.
Yes.
Excuse me, Councilman. Excuse me, Councilman. Excuse me, Mr. Shuren, could you please be quiet for one moment? Mr. Conroy, to be clear, in the budget that your office prepared with mine, was less savings part of the tentative budget?
It was not.
Thank you.
Why not? Why? Because if you had the experience in 2018, and why wouldn't you? And you're making the assumptions for the town. For the council member's budget, why wouldn't you have made the same assumptions for her budget?
Because, sir, the tentative budget is a product of the supervisor. It is the supervisor's budget. The administrative staff of the supervisor, during our first initial meeting, the first order of business was no less savings in the budget.
So just to be clear again, Mr. Conroy, the concept of less savings came in with the 76 amendments that were added to the budget. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
And what's your comment, Mr. Blakeman, since you choose to respond, to his comment that the GOP member budget protects $2 million in holdover patronage employees and beefs up their staff allowances to the tune of $500,000?
Yeah.
What's your specific response to that?
So let me tell you about this guy. This is a guy...
Can you please respond to the substantive question?
I'm responding the way I want to respond. This is a guy who was the executive director of the Port Authority.
I know, I worked there with him.
For a few months because he was totally incompetent.
That's not true.
And that's why the governor had to have him leave, because he caused such an uproar and such a commotion at the Port Authority with the crazy ideas he had that he served the shortest tenure, I think, ever in the history of the Port Authority that I think goes back to the early 1900s. That's number one. Number two, he has an animus towards the Nassau County Republican Committee because he wanted to run for statewide office once, and the Nassau County Republican Committee said they couldn't support him because he was unqualified. That's what I know about George Marlin.
So now can you please respond to the question that I asked? What do you have to say with respect to his specific criticism that your budget protects $2 million in holdover patronage employees and beefs up their staff allowances to the tune of $500,000? Is that true?
No.
What are the staff allowances that he's referring to?
I'll refer that to the budget officer, but let me tell you something about less savings, okay? Less savings is like everything else in the budget. It's based on historical data, okay? A budget is a guesstimate based on facts that occurred in the past, and they're estimates made by qualified professionals as to what is likely to occur over the course of the year, because you don't know what's going to occur. And that's why sometimes there's budget surpluses, and that's why sometimes there's budget deficits. Less savings is a way that you can pad money and put money aside and hide money by removing it so that there's a surplus the next year. So whoever's running the next year, whether it's me, whether it's Aaron, whether it's the supervisor, can then come in and say, well, we have this surplus, so now we can cut taxes. We prefer to budget honestly and realize that there is going to be less savings, and the money would be better suited in the pockets of the taxpayers than hidden in our budget, so next year we could all pat each other on the back and say that we gave a big tax cut to everybody.
Okay.
Let's see what happens next year. For this year, the projection is that we can well afford a 4% tax cut to our taxpayers and be in budget line because the less savings are most likely to occur. Am I right, Mr. Conroy, on that?
Councilman, you're right on the money on that.
Yeah, I just want to know
Hold on one second. Mr. Shuren, I would like to see if Mr. Conroy or Ms. Smith can answer your question with regard to your specific staffing question.
With respect to increasing the majority's budget, in the past, in as much as the employees of the helpline worked for the supervisor, it was never actually put into the supervisor's budget. So the supervisor's office had the benefit of those employees without that being a part of their budget. This year, for the first time, that number was put into Supervisor Gillen's budget, and because it was identified, I don't know if it's because it was identified, but it was quickly removed into the majority's budget. So that accounts for the $300,000 that was moved to the majority's budget. May I respond with respect to the less savings numbers and why the supervisor was uncomfortable using that number in her budget?
Yes, please.
To be clear, that we don't pad or hide money. That's what we were trying to avoid.
Yeah, and to be clear also, I mean, you're talking about, you all have been on the board for many, many years. And you're talking about now you're making changes supposedly to be transparent. I mean, where were you in 2017? Where were you in 2016? Where were you in 2015? So it's nice you're finally
I thought
getting
you
your act
attended
together,
many meetings where we all spoke about transparency. Come on. Let's not change history here.
Okay, Ms. Smith, you can continue.
So with respect to that number, Mr. Conroy provided us, when we first got here to Town Hall, with the listing that represents the 10 million. I'm not familiar with the employees, but I'll tell you the Parks Commissioner, who is, I think he retired last year, he's being counted among the less savings. That position was certainly replaced to my knowledge, which means you can't count that as less savings. Additionally, that employee had a material payout. I would hesitate to put the numbers out there, but that's the pattern. An employee leaves, no disputing. A number of employees do leave. But the controller has a listing of what's due these employees, a material list, which for auditing purposes, it has to be prepared. I have that list. I know what the expectations are with respect to the employees who are going to leave and how much they are legally entitled to. based on vacation that has not been paid or sick time that has not been paid. And I'll leave it there. So if an employee...
If I understand you correctly, I think you're making a very good point, which I haven't heard anyone address, is that the employees that you're expecting to leave, you're going to have obligations with respect to them for sick leave, vacation pay, severance pay, whatever it is. And are you saying that the majority's budget doesn't take into account those expenses?
Can I ask a question, actually? I'd like to ask the controller a question.
It's answering your question.
Reviewing...
Clear something up.
Go ahead.
It said, we identified the Parks Commissioner as being retired with less savings. An associate, I believe it was a Deputy Park Commissioner, took on those responsibilities, vacating his position where we don't incur a salary for his position. So that, in effect, pays for it. Vacated positions, filling other positions.
I believe that position was refilled by Nazarene, the former town clerk. Is that correct?
Well, I don't know if it's that particular position. I know there were other...
Ms. Nazarene was replaced as a Deputy Parks Commissioner. Isn't that correct?
That is correct, but
I think at the first town board meeting.
I believe there are other deputies that left. 100 people left.
So Mr. Conroy, upon your review of the preliminary budget, is there adequate funding for the accrued vacation, the sick, all that time?
Based on our projections, there is adequate funding baked into this budget.
And is it legally permissive to budget in the reserves? To budget a reserve?
No, it is not.
Okay, thank you.
Whether or not something is legally permissive or not ought not be the standard for government or anyone.
Neither is Mr. Marlin.
The measure of a society is its obligations and its obedience to the rules which aren't necessarily against the law. There's lots of things that you can and do that aren't necessarily against the law but are still wrong. And I see that a lot in the town of Hempstead. And there's things that are more important than just the bare obedience to the law.
So because Mr. Marlin disagrees with reviewing historical data to come up with items in the budget, does that mean that because he says so, should we not budget for snowstorms because we don't know how much snow we're going to get?
It's totally apples and oranges.
It's not apples and oranges. He disagrees with the fact that we're using historical data. That's exactly how we budget for snowstorms. That's exactly how we buy salt. That's exactly how we buy sand. That's exactly how we prepare to buy plows, because we use historical data.
Ms. Smith, did the historical data from 2017 show that we realized less savings based on the audited financials?
2017, the less savings amount of 13 million was not realized. The actual number of payroll was 173 million versus whatever was recorded. I believe it was one in the range of 162. In addition, the board borrowed to pay for the separation cost to the tune of I believe it's 8.5 million. And so
if I'm correct, you planned on realizing $13 million of less savings last year, but in fact you only, according to what you just said, achieved $3 million of less savings. So you missed it by like 80%. Yet your estimates now this year, you expect to reach 100% or more. That seems to be what accounts for
Mr. Conroy, could you please correct that misstatement? Explain where we are in year 2018 accurately.
But you're talking about historical data, and the historical data, Councilman D'Esposito is touting how they use historical data and George Marlin doesn't. I'm not sure how he knows that, but the historical data, Ms. Smith, indicates that in 2017 we missed the mark by a whole lot. Isn't that correct?
And you borrowed money to make up the difference, which is worse.
Mr. Conroy, could you explain 2018, where we are this year?
Thank you. 2018, $12 million baked into, as I mentioned earlier, baked into the budget as less savings. We're currently at $11,300,000. The reason why we budgeted aggressively.
Haven't filled the positions yet, probably.
Okay, thank you for that. The reason why we went a bit aggressively is, as I mentioned, a collective bargaining agreement calls for a very, very worthwhile and lucrative investment, or I should say incentive, of retiree spouses medical coverage for life, which the prior collective bargaining agreement did not have. There is great enthusiasm out there now. I believe, Mike, if you can correct me, I believe we've got about $4 million worth of people that are committed to going, roughly half of that $8.5 million, and we haven't even started the year out. So there is great enthusiasm. We budget very conservatively, as if you looked back at our ratings recently, you will see that that's exactly what's highlighted from Moody's and S&P. And again, I'm very confident about it, and I look at the results of 2018's budget, where a $12 million projected less savings is currently at 11.3.
My last question then, is there anything to stop this board from filling positions that have become vacant this year, which you're counting as less savings with patronage employees, Nasrin, or whoever Post Avenue decides they want to give a job to? Is there anything that prevents them from filling those positions? So that what you say right now
I think your
may not be true in the
characterization
future?
of jobs is offensive.
Well, is there anything that prevents what you're saying to be the fact now from changing later this year as those jobs are filled with patronage employees?
I don't understand. Can you explain?
Excuse me. Going forward, we're not going to have uncivilized meetings. If you call out from the audience, you will be politely asked to refrain from doing so again. If you do it twice, you will be asked to leave and you will be escorted out.
Okay, so my question really is, you said that you're on schedule right now for 2018. My question is, there's a few months left in 2018. After this budget is passed, is there anything that prevents this board or the supervisor from filling positions such that the information that you just gave would change and become not accurate?
Well, I don't know if I'm the right person to answer that. What I can answer is that positions are filled based upon experience and need. If there is a need that arises, this board will take a look at the need, assess accordingly, and fill accordingly if necessary.
Does the majority plan on filling any positions next month? Wholesale filling some of these empty positions after this budget is passed?
I don't think there's any wholesale plan to increase the number of heads that are working at the town of Hempstead, but as Mr. Conroy said, people are filled in based on need. And if there is a need, then they'll be filled in. If there isn't, we'll be as conservative as possible, bearing in mind that hopefully next year we'll have the second year of a tax cut and start giving the taxpayers of this town more relief because they're up to their necks. People live in a paycheck to paycheck, and it's getting very difficult for them to make ends meet. And that's what I hear when I walk around my community, and I think that the others on this board hear the same thing.
So then how do you...
Thank you, Mr. Sherman. Your time is up. I do not have any more slips, so do I have a motion to recess this hearing until 7 p.m. tonight?
Second.
Madam Clerk?
Councilman Ambrosino? Aye. Councilman Blakeman? Aye. Councilman Diaz-Bazito? Aye. Councilman Dunn? Aye. Councilwoman King Sweeney?
Aye.
Senior Councilwoman Gooseby? Supervisor Gillen?
Aye.
I'll give you a call. Okay, I have to take my daughter to school, drop her, and then I'll give you a call.